The silver locket around her neck changed everything I thought I knew about my family. But let me back up to the moment I pulled Celeste from that burning car on Highway 26. Because what happened next would turn my son's life upside down in the most incredible way. Before we dive in, tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. My name is Damian Torres. I'm 34, work as an EMT here in Portland, Oregon, and I'm raising my 8-year-old son Nolan by myself after losing my wife Vivian to cancer 3 years ago. That rainy Thursday evening started like any other day, picking up my boy from school. But by the time I went to bed that night, I'd discovered something that would change our lives forever. The woman I saved from that wreckage was Celeste Whitmore, though I didn't know her name yet when I was pulling her unconscious body from twisted metal and broken glass. What I did notice, even in those terrifying moments with smoke filling my lungs, was the silver locket hanging around her neck. It caught the reflection of the emergency lights, and something about that intricate bird design made my heart skip a beat, though I couldn't figure out why. You see, for 3 years I'd been carrying around a promise I made to my dying wife. Vivian had been adopted as a baby and never knew her biological family. On her deathbed, she made me swear that someday I'd help Nolan find his extended family, that I'd give him the grandparents and aunts and uncles she never had the chance to know. I'd been failing at that promise every single day since her funeral. Nolan had been asking me harder questions lately. Just that afternoon in the car, he'd looked at me with those serious brown eyes that remind me so much of his mother and said, "Dad, why don't I have any grandparents like the other kids?" Did Mom's family not want to know me? Those words cut deep because I didn't have any answers for him. But sometimes the universe has a way of answering prayers you didn't even know you were praying. Sometimes a single moment of helping a stranger can unlock secrets that have been hidden for decades. And sometimes a piece of jewelry worn by a woman you've never met can reveal that the family you've been searching for has been searching for you too. Let me paint you a picture of what our life looked like before everything changed. 3 years after losing Vivian, I was barely keeping my head above water. Our little apartment on Southeast Division Street wasn't much to look at, but it was home. The walls were covered with Nolan's artwork and school photos, and I kept Vivian's coffee mug on the kitchen counter because somehow it made the place feel less empty. Working as an EMT means irregular hours and decent pay, but raising a kid alone on that salary meant I was pulling double shifts whenever possible. My partner, Rodriguez, kept telling me I looked exhausted, and he wasn't wrong. Most nights I'd collapse on the couch after helping Nolan with homework, wondering if I was failing at this whole single dad thing. Nolan was 8 then, all elbows and knees and endless questions. He had his mother's curious nature and her warm, brown eyes. But lately those eyes had been filled with confusion I couldn't fix. See, Vivian had been adopted when she was just 6 months old. Her adoptive parents, wonderful people, had passed away when Nolan was 3, so he never really got to know them either. That left us with no extended family, no holiday traditions beyond what Vivian and I had created ourselves. The questions started innocently enough. After birthday parties or school events, Nolan would come home asking why he didn't have grandparents who spoiled him or aunts who took him on special outings. I'd give him the same answer every time about how families come in all shapes and sizes, but I could see it wasn't enough anymore. That Thursday evening, I'd picked him up from the after-school program at Rosa Parks Elementary like I did every week. Mrs. Chen, his favorite teacher, waved goodbye and reminded me about the upcoming family tree project. My stomach dropped. These projects were torture for kids like Nolan who couldn't fill in half the branches. "Dad, can we stop for ice cream?" Nolan asked as he buckled his seatbelt, his backpack stuffed with worksheets and art projects. "Not today, buddy. We need to get home for dinner." I was exhausted and stressed about the overtime hours I'd need to pick up to cover next month's rent increase. As we drove through the winding roads toward home, the rain started coming down harder. Portland in October means gray skies and constant drizzle, the kind of weather that seeps into your bones and makes everything feel heavier. Mrs. Chen said we're supposed to interview our grandparents for the family tree project, Nolan said quietly, staring out the rain-streaked window. What am I supposed to do? There it was, the question that had been building for weeks. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and tried to find words that wouldn't disappoint him again. "We'll figure something out, Noel. Maybe you can write about Mom's adoptive parents, or we can research adoption and make it about chosen family. But that's not the same," he said, and his voice had that small, defeated quality that broke my heart every time. "Tyler's grandma is teaching him to bake cookies this weekend. Emma's grandpa takes her fishing. I don't have anybody like that." And I pulled over at a red light and turned to look at him properly. His little face was pressed against the window, and I could see my own failures reflected in his disappointment. This wasn't just about a school project. This was about belonging, about knowing where you come from, about having a tribe that extends beyond just the two of us. "Your mom wanted to find her biological family," I said, the words feeling heavy in the quiet car. She always wondered about her birth parents, whether she had siblings, what her medical history looked like. She made me promise that someday we'd figure it out together. Nolan perked up a little. "Really? Mom wanted to find them?" "She did. She had this old journal where she'd write down dreams about meeting her mother, or theories about why she was given up for adoption. She never blamed anyone, you understand? She loved her adoptive parents completely, but she always felt like there was this missing piece." The light turned green and I started driving again, the rain getting heavier. I'd never shared this much about Vivian's search with Nolan before, mainly because I'd made no progress on that promise in 3 years. I'd called a few adoption agencies, browsed some genealogy websites, but without more information, I'd hit dead ends every time. "So we could still find them?" Nolan asked, hope creeping back into his voice. "Maybe," I said, though privately I doubted it. "How do you find people when you don't even know their names?" That's when we crested the hill on Highway 26, and I saw the sedan spinning out of control in the rain ahead of us. In that split second before everything changed, I was just a tired single dad worried about family tree projects and rent increases, carrying around a promise to a dead woman that I was pretty sure I'd never be able to keep. Everything happened so fast that my EMT training kicked in before my brain could process what I was seeing. 1 second I was talking to Nolan about family trees, and the next, I was watching a silver sedan hydroplane on the wet asphalt about 50 yards ahead of us. The car spun sideways, clipped the guardrail, and flipped end over end down the steep embankment that dropped into the forest below. I slammed on my brakes and pulled over to the shoulder, my heart hammering against my ribs. The rain was coming down in sheets now, turning the world into a gray blur. But I could see smoke rising from somewhere down that hill. "Dad, what happened?" Nolan's voice was small and scared from the back seat. "There's been an accident, buddy." I was already reaching for my phone, my hands moving on autopilot. "I need you to call 911 right now and tell them there's been a single vehicle rollover on Highway 26, mile marker 31. Can you do that for me?" Nolan nodded, his eyes wide. I handed him my phone and grabbed my emergency kit from the trunk. I always kept basic supplies in my car, a habit from work that Vivian used to tease me about. Tonight, I was grateful for my paranoia. "Tell them an EMT is on scene and heading down to assess," I called back to Nolan as I started down the muddy embankment. "And stay in the truck no matter what you hear, okay?" The slope was steeper than it looked from the road, and the rain had turned the earth into slick mud that grabbed at my boots with every step. Tree branches whipped across my face as I half ran, half slid toward the wreckage. The car had landed upside down against a cluster of Douglas firs, and I could smell gasoline mixing with the smoke. When I reached the vehicle, I dropped to my knees and peered through the shattered driver's side window. A woman was hanging upside down, held by her seatbelt, conscious but clearly dazed. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, and her left leg was pinned under the crumpled dashboard. "Hey there," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional. "My name's Damien. I'm an EMT. Can you tell me your name?" She turned her head toward me slowly, blinking away rainwater that was dripping through the broken windshield. "Celeste," she managed. "Celeste Whitmore. I can't feel my leg." "Okay, Celeste. I'm going to get you out of here, but I need you to stay still while I figure out the best way to do that." I was assessing her condition while I talked, checking for obvious injuries, looking for signs of spinal damage. The smoke was getting thicker, and I could hear a faint hissing sound that made my skin crawl. "Is the car going to explode?" Celeste asked, and I could hear the panic creeping into her voice. "No," I lied smoothly. "Cars don't actually explode, like in the movies. But we do need to get you out of here soon because of the smoke." The truth was, I could smell gas fumes getting stronger, and that hissing sound suggested a fuel line had ruptured. We had minutes, not hours. I reached through the window and felt along her neck and spine, checking for obvious injuries. She winced when I touched her left shoulder, but nothing seemed immediately life-threatening. The biggest problem was her leg, which was trapped under the twisted metal of the dashboard. "Celeste, I need to cut your seatbelt, but when I do, you're going to drop. I'm going to support your head and shoulders, okay?" She nodded, and I could see she was fighting to stay calm. That's when I noticed the necklace. Even in the dim light filtering through the smoke, the silver locket around her neck seemed to catch every available ray. It was an intricate piece, with what looked like a small bird engraved on the front, and something about it made me pause for just a second. I shook off the distraction and focused on the task at hand. Using my trauma shears, I cut through the seatbelt while supporting Celeste's upper body. She cried out as her full weight shifted, but I managed to ease her down without jarring her potentially injured leg too much. "The dashboard is pinning your leg," I explained, "but I think I can shift it enough to get you free. This is going to hurt. Just do it," she said through gritted teeth. I braced myself against the car frame and pushed against the crumpled metal with everything I had. It gave way with a grinding screech, and Celeste's leg came free. She screamed, but she was free. "I'm going to carry you up to the road now," I told her, already sliding my arms under her body. "Try to stay conscious and keep talking to me." The climb back up the embankment was the longest 5 minutes of my life. Celeste was dead weight in my arms, and the muddy slope seemed determined to send us both sliding back down. The smoke was getting thicker behind us, and I could hear sirens approaching from the distance. When we finally reached the road, I laid Celeste down on the shoulder just as the first fire truck rounded the curve. My shirt was soaked with rain and sweat. My hands were shaking from adrenaline, and I was breathing hard from the climb. But as the paramedics took over her care, I couldn't stop staring at that silver locket resting against her collarbone, wondering why it felt so familiar. For 3 days after the accident, I couldn't get that locket out of my head. I'd be washing dishes or helping Nolan with his math homework, and suddenly I'd see it again in my mind, that intricate silver bird catching the emergency lights. It was driving me crazy because I knew I'd seen it before, but the memory stayed just out of reach, like trying to remember a dream after you've already gotten out of bed. Nolan noticed my distraction. Kids are like that, picking up on things. Adults think they're hiding. "Dad, you're doing that thing again," he said over breakfast on Sunday morning, pointing his spoon at me. "What thing?" "That thinking too hard thing. Your forehead gets all wrinkled up like when you're trying to fix the garbage disposal." I laughed despite myself. "Just work stuff, buddy. Nothing for you to worry about." But it wasn't work stuff, and I was worried. Not about Celeste's physical condition. I'd called the hospital the day after the accident and learned she was stable with a broken leg and some bruising. No, I was worried about why that necklace felt so significant, why it seemed connected to something important I couldn't quite remember. Sunday afternoon, while Nolan was building Lego cities on the living room floor, I found myself digging through the closet where I kept Vivian's things. I hadn't touched that box in over a year, but something was pulling me toward it. Inside were her journals, photo albums, a few pieces of jewelry, and the sketchbook she used to draw in when she couldn't sleep during her chemo treatments. I sat on the bedroom floor with her sketchbook in my lap, turning pages filled with doodles and random thoughts. Vivian had always been artistic, sketching flowers or faces or whatever caught her imagination. About halfway through, I found what my subconscious had been searching for. There, drawn in careful pencil strokes, was a locket. Not just any locket. The same intricate design I'd seen around Celeste's neck. The same delicate bird with outstretched wings. The same ornate border around the edge. Underneath the drawing, Vivian had written, "Mom's necklace from my dreams." I wonder if she really wore something like this. My hand started shaking. Vivian used to have vivid dreams about her birth mother, dreams that felt more like memories, even though she'd been adopted as a baby. She'd wake up with details: a woman's laugh, the smell of vanilla perfume, or pieces of jewelry like this locket. Her therapist had told her these dreams were her mind's way of processing the loss of her biological family. But Vivian always insisted they felt too real to be just imagination. I stared at that sketch for a long time, comparing it in my mind to what I'd seen around Celeste's neck. They were identical. Not similar, identical. Down to the tiny details in the bird's feathers and the way the chain connected to the pendant. This was either the most incredible coincidence I'd ever encountered, or it was something else entirely. By Monday evening, I'd made my decision. I was going to visit Celeste at the hospital, and I was going to bring Vivian's sketchbook with me. I told myself I just wanted to check on the woman I'd saved, that it was normal to follow up on someone you'd pulled from a car wreck. But deep down, I knew I was chasing something bigger than professional courtesy. Rodriguez covered the last few hours of my shift so I could get to Portland General before visiting hours ended. I found Celeste's room on the 4th floor, her leg elevated in a cast, looking much better than she had hanging upside down in that car. "Damien," she said, her face lighting up when she saw me in the doorway. "I was hoping you'd come by. I never got to properly thank you." "You don't need to thank me," I said, suddenly feeling nervous about why I was really there. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay. How's the leg?" "Broken in 2 places, but the doctors say I'll heal completely. I got lucky." She gestured to a chair beside her bed. "Please sit. I feel like I owe you more than just thank you. You saved my life." I sat down, Vivian's sketchbook tucked under my arm. "Actually, I wanted to ask you about something. That necklace you were wearing during the accident, is it a family heirloom?" Celeste's hand went instinctively to her throat, where the locket rested against her hospital gown. "This? Yes, it belonged to my grandmother. It's the only thing I have from my biological family." "Your biological family?" "I was adopted as a baby," she explained. "My adoptive parents were wonderful, but they passed away a few years ago, and I've been trying to research my birth family ever since. This locket is literally the only clue I have. My adoptive mother said it was with me when I was placed with them." My heart was pounding now. "Celeste, I need to show you something. This is going to sound crazy, but I think there might be a connection between your locket and my late wife." I opened Vivian's sketchbook to the page with the drawing and handed it to her. Celeste took one look at the sketch and went completely pale. "Where did this come from?" she whispered. "My wife drew that 3 years ago. She was adopted too, and she used to have dreams about her birth family. She drew this from memory after one of those dreams." Celeste stared at the drawing, then at me, then back at the drawing. "What was your wife's name?" Vivian Torres." The silence that followed my words felt like it lasted forever, but it was probably only a few seconds. Celeste was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read, clutching Vivian's sketchbook so tightly her knuckles had gone white. "Vivian Torres," she repeated slowly, like she was testing how the name felt in her mouth. "Born in 1991, adopted through Catholic Family Services in Eugene." My blood went cold. "How could you possibly know that?" Celeste set the sketchbook down carefully and reached into the bedside table drawer. She pulled out a manila folder that looked like it had been handled 1,000 times, the edges worn soft, from years of opening and closing. "Because I've been looking for Vivian Torres my entire adult life." She opened the folder and spread papers across her hospital bed. Birth certificates, adoption records, genealogy charts, letters from various agencies. It looked like the organized chaos of someone who'd been conducting a serious investigation for years. "My birth name was Celeste Torres," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was born in Eugene in 1993, 2 years after my sister Vivian. We were separated when our birth mother couldn't care for us anymore. Vivian was adopted first when she was 18 months old. I was placed 6 months later with a different family. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. You're her sister. You're Vivian's little sister." "I think so. I've been trying to find her for 8 years, ever since my adoptive parents died and I started searching for my biological family. But Torres is such a common name, and I didn't have much to go on. The adoption was closed, records were sealed. All I had was this locket and a few basic details. She picked up one of the papers from the bed. Look, this is a letter I sent to an address I found for a Vivian Torres 3 years ago. It came back as undeliverable. I sent dozens of letters. Over the years, all returned. I took the letter with shaking hands. It was addressed to our old apartment, the one Vivian and I had lived in before Nolan was born. We'd moved when she was pregnant, which meant Celeste's letter had arrived after we'd already left. The postmark was dated just 2 months before Vivian died. She was looking for you too, I managed to say. She never stopped wondering about her biological family. She made me promise before she died that I'd help Nolan find his extended family someday. She wanted him to know where he came from. Celeste was crying now, tears streaming down her face as she looked through the adoption papers. She was my big sister. I used to have these dreams about an older girl who would sing to me, someone who felt safe and familiar. My therapist said they were just childhood fantasies, but they felt so real. Vivian remembered singing too, I said, my own voice thick with emotion. She told me once that she had fragments of memories, like taking care of a baby. She thought maybe she'd had a younger sibling, but the adoption agency wouldn't tell her anything. Celeste reached for her locket and opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph so small I had to squint to make it out. It showed 2 little girls, one maybe 2 years old, and one just a baby, sitting together on what looked like a porch swing. This was in the locket when I was adopted, she said. I always assumed it was me and my birth mother, but look at the older girl. I looked closer at the photograph and my heart nearly stopped. Even at 2 years old, the face was unmistakable. It was Vivian. The same eyes, the same smile, even the same way she tilted her head slightly when she was happy. That's her, I whispered. That's definitely her. I have a nephew, Celeste said suddenly, looking up at me with wonder. Vivian had a son. I have family. His name is Nolan. He's 8 years old and he looks just like his mother. He's been asking me for years about grandparents and aunts and uncles, wanting to know why he doesn't have extended family like other kids. I never knew what to tell him. Celeste wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. Is he the reason you made that promise to Vivian? To find her family? Yes. She was dying, and she was so worried about leaving him without any connection to where he came from. She made me swear I'd find her biological family somehow, give him the grandparents and relatives she never got to know, and instead her family found you, Celeste said softly. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us processing what this meant. 2 sisters who'd spent their entire lives searching for each other, who'd been sending letters and following false leads and dreaming about reunion, had missed connecting by a matter of months and a change of address. But somehow, through a car accident on a rainy highway, their paths had finally crossed. I want to meet him, Celeste said finally. I want to meet my nephew and tell him about his mother's family. I want to show him this photograph and let him know he's not alone in the world. He's going to love you, I said, meaning every word. You're the answer to every question he's ever asked about family. You're the missing piece we've been looking for. 2 weeks later, Celeste was sitting at our kitchen table teaching Nolan how to make Vivian's favorite pancakes while I watched from the doorway, still trying to wrap my head around how completely our lives had changed. The recipe had been lost. When Vivian died because I'd never paid attention to her weekend cooking rituals, too busy with work or errands to learn the little details that make a house feel like home. But Celeste knew it by heart. Your mom always added a pinch of cinnamon to the batter, she was telling Nolan, her leg cast propped on a kitchen chair while she guided his hands on the whisk. And she never measured the vanilla, just eyeballed it until it smelled right. How do you know that? Nolan asked, concentrating hard on not spilling flour everywhere. Because she used to make these same pancakes when we were little, before we were adopted. I was only 6 months old when we were separated, but taste memory is powerful. The first time I tried making pancakes as an adult, I kept adding things until they tasted like home. I'd heard this story 3 times now, and it still gave me chills. Celeste had spent years unknowingly recreating pieces of her early childhood, drawn to recipes and songs and even color combinations that connected her to Vivian. She'd painted her apartment walls the same shade of soft yellow that Vivian had chosen for Nolan's nursery. She'd been buying vanilla candles her whole adult life because the scent felt comforting, never realizing it was because Vivian had worn vanilla perfume. The connections between them went deeper than just genetics. They were sisters in ways that went beyond blood, linked by shared experiences neither of them had been old enough to consciously remember, but had carried in their hearts anyway. Nolan flipped his first pancake successfully and grinned at Celeste like she'd just taught him to fly. "Aunt Celeste, do you have any pictures of Mom when she was little?" "I do," she said, reaching for the photo album she now carried everywhere. "And I have stories too. Did you know your mom was stubborn even as a toddler? Our birth mother used to say Vivian would rather walk into walls than admit she was going the wrong direction." Nolan giggled. "Dad says I'm just like that." "You are," I confirmed from the doorway. "Definitely your mother's son." Over the past 2 weeks, Celeste had moved her research from Portland back to Eugene to be closer to us, taking a job at a local genealogy company where her years of investigative experience had made her invaluable. She'd found a small apartment, just 10 minutes from our place, close enough that Nolan could walk there after school when I was working late shifts. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't parenting alone. More importantly, for the first time in his life, Nolan had extended family. He had someone who could tell him stories about his mother's childhood, someone who shared his stubborn streak and his tendency to hum while doing homework. He had an aunt who remembered their family's traditions and could teach him things about his heritage that I'd never been able to provide. The family tree project that had seemed so impossible just a month ago was now Nolan's favorite assignment. He'd filled in branches I didn't even know existed, learned about great-grandparents and family history that Celeste had uncovered through her research. For the first time, he felt connected to something bigger than just the two of us. But the biggest change wasn't in Nolan, it was in me. For 3 years, I'd been carrying around guilt about that promise to Vivian. Every time Nolan asked about grandparents or cousins, every time he looked sad at school events where other kids had big extended families cheering them on, I felt like I was failing him. I felt like I was failing her. I'd been so focused on the promise I couldn't keep that I'd missed the miracle happening right in front of me. Sometimes the universe has timing we can't understand or control. Sometimes the help we need comes in forms we never expected. I saved Celeste from that car wreck, but the truth is she saved us too. She gave Nolan the family connection he'd been craving and helped me realize that keeping promises to the people we love doesn't always happen the way we expect it to. Standing in my kitchen, watching my son learn family recipes from the aunt he'd never known existed, I finally understood something Vivian used to tell me when she was sick. She'd say that love finds a way to complete itself, even across impossible distances and circumstances. That silver locket hadn't just exposed a family secret. It had revealed something much more important, that family isn't just about who you're born to or who raises you. It's about the people who choose to love you, who show up when you need them most, who help you remember where you come from, so you know where you're going. Nolan finished his stack of pancakes and looked up at both of us with syrup on his chin and pure happiness in his eyes. "Can we do this every Sunday now? All 3 of us together?" Celeste reached over and ruffled his hair, the same way Vivian used to do. "Every Sunday," she promised. "That's what families do."